双语音标领航，注音阅读启蒙，叶兴阳有声读物。
England's treasure by foreign trade, or the balance of our foreign trade is the rule of our treasure. Written by Thomas Munn of London, merchant, and now published for the common good by his son John Munn of Bearsted in the county of Kent, Esquire, London. Printed by J.G. for Thomas Clark, and are to be sold at his shop at the south entrance of the Royal Exchange, 1664. To the Right Honourable Thomas Earl of Southampton, Lord High Treasurer of England, Lord Warden of the New Forest, Knight of the most noble Order of the Garter, and one of His Majesty's most honourable Privy Council. My Lord, I present this ensuing treatise to your Lordship as its proper patron, to whom, by virtue of your great trust, the greatest, doubtless, in this kingdom, the management of His Majesty's treasure, and improvement of his revenue, are most peculiarly committed. The title of it, England's Treasure by Foreign Trade, alone bespeaks your notice. The argument, being of so public a nature, may invite your perusal, but the tract itself will, I hope, deserve your Lordship's protection. It was left me in the nature of a legacy by my father, for whose sake I cannot but value it as one of my best movables, and as such I dedicate it to your Lordship. He was in his time famous amongst merchants, and well known to most men of business, for his general experience in affairs, and notable insight into trade. Neither was he less observed for his integrity to his prince, and zeal to the Commonwealth. The serious discourses of such men are commonly not unprofitable. To your Lordship's judgment I submit this treatise, and my presumption herein to your pardon. My Lord, your most faithful and obedient servant, John Munn. England's treasure by foreign trade, or the balance of our foreign trade is the rule of our treasure. My son, in a former discourse I have endeavored after my manner briefly to teach thee two things. The first is piety, how to fear God aright, according to his works and word. The second is policy, how to love and serve thy country, by instructing thee in the duties and proceedings of sundry vocations, which either order, or else act the affairs of the Commonwealth, in which as some things do, especially lend to preserve, and others are more apt to enlarge the same. So am I now to speak of money, which doth indifferently serve to both those happy ends, wherein I will observe this order. First, to shew the general means whereby a kingdom may be enriched, and then to proceed to those particular courses by which princes are accustomed to be supplied with treasure. But first of all I will say something of the merchant, because he must be a principal agent in this great business. Chapter 1. The qualities which are required in a perfect merchant of foreign trade. The love and service of our country consisteth not so much in the knowledge of those duties which are to be performed by others, as in the skilful practice of that which is done ourselves. And therefore, my son, it is now fit that I say something of the merchant, which I hope in due time shall be thy vocation. Yet herein are my thoughts free from all ambition, although I rank thee in a place of so high esteem, for the merchant is worthily called the steward of the kingdom's stock, by way of commerce with other nations, a work of no less reputation than trust, which ought to be performed with great skill and conscience, that so the private gain may ever accompany the public good. And because the nobleness of this profession may the better stir up thy desires and endeavors to obtain those abilities which may effect it worthily, I will briefly set down the excellent qualities which are required in a perfect merchant. Point 1. He ought to be a good penman, a good arithmetician, and a good accomptant, by that noble order of debtor and creditor, which is used only amongst merchants, also to be expert in the order and form of charter parties, bills of lading, invoices, contracts, bills of exchange, and policies of insurance. 2. He ought to know the measures, weights, and moneys of all foreign countries, especially where we have trade, and the moneys not only by their several denominations, but also by their intrinsic values in weight and fineness, compared with the standard of this kingdom, without which he cannot well direct his affairs. Point 3. He ought to know the customs, tolls, taxes, impositions, conducts, and other charges upon all matters of merchandise exported or imported to and from the said foreign countries. Point 4. He ought to know in what several commodities each country abounds, and what be the wares which they want, and how and from whence they are furnished with the same. Point 5. He ought to understand, and to be a diligent observer of the rates of exchanges by bills, from one state to another, whereby he may the better direct his affairs, and remit over and receive home his moneys to the most advantage possible. Point 6. He ought to know what goods are prohibited to be exported or imported in the said foreign countries, lest otherwise he should incur great danger and loss in the ordering of his affairs. Point 7. He ought to know upon what rates and conditions to freight his ships, and insure his adventures from one country to another, and to be well acquainted with the laws, orders, and customs of the insurance office both here and beyond the seas, in the many accidents which may happen upon the damage or loss of ships or goods, or both these. Point 8. He ought to have knowledge in the goodness and in the prices of all the several materials which are required for the building and repairing of ships, and the divers workmanships of the same, as also for the mass, tackling, cordage, ordnance, victuals, munition, and provisions of many kinds, together with the ordinary wages of commanders, officers, and mariners, all which concern the merchant as he is an owner of ships.
9.
He ought, by the divers occasions which happen sometime in the buying and selling of one commodity and sometimes in another, to have indifferent if not perfect knowledge in all manner of merchandise or wares, which is to be as it were a man of all occupations and trades. Point 10. He ought by his voyaging on the seas to become skillful in the art of navigation. Point 11. He ought, as he is a traveler, and sometimes abiding in foreign countries, to attain to the speaking of divers languages, and to be a diligent observer of the ordinary revenues and expenses of foreign princes, together with their strength, both by sea and land, their laws, customs, policies, manners, religions, arts, and the like, to be able to give account thereof in all occasions for the good of his country. Point 12. Lastly, although there be no necessity that such a merchant should be a great scholar, yet is it at least required that in his youth he learn the Latine tongue, which will the better enable him in all the rest of his endeavors. Thus have I briefly shewed thee a pattern for thy diligence, the merchant and his qualities, which in truth are such and so many, that I find no other profession which letteth into more worldly knowledge, and it cannot be denied but that their sufficiency doth appear likewise in the excellent government of state at Venice,
Lucca,
Genoa, Florence, the Low Countries, and divers other places of Christendom, and in those states also where they are least esteemed, yet is their skill and knowledge often used by those who sit in the highest places of authority. It is therefore an act beyond rashness in some, who do disenable their counsel and judgment, even in books printed, making them uncapable of those ways and means which do either enrich or impoverish a commonwealth, when in truth this is only effected by the mystery of their trade, as I shall plainly shew in that which followeth. It is true indeed that many merchants here in England, finding less encouragement given to their profession than in other countries, and seeing themselves not so well esteemed as their noble vocation requireth, and according to the great consequence of the same, do not therefore labor to attain unto the excellency of their profession, neither is it practiced by the nobility of this kingdom as it is in other states from the father to the son throughout their generations, to the great increase of their wealth, and maintenance of their names and families, whereas the memory of our richest merchants is suddenly extinguished, the son being left rich, scorneth the profession of his father, conceiving more honor to be a gentleman, although but in name, to consume his estate in dark ignorance and excess, than to follow the steps of his father as an industrious merchant to maintain and advance his fortunes. But now, leaving the merchant's praise, we will come to his practice, or at least to so much thereof as concerns the bringing of treasure into the kingdom. Chapter 2. The means to enrich this kingdom, and to increase our treasure. Although a kingdom may be enriched by gifts received, or by purchase taken from some other nations, yet these are things uncertain and of small consideration when they happen. The ordinary means therefore to increase our wealth and treasure is by foreign trade, wherein we must ever observe this rule, to sell more to strangers yearly than we consume of theirs in value. For suppose that Whe kingdom is plentifully served with the cloth, lead, tin,
iron,
fish, and other native commodities. We do yearly export the overplus to foreign countries to the value of £200,000, by which means we are enabled beyond the seas to buy and bring in foreign wares for our use and consumption, to the value of £200,000. By this order duly kept in our trading, we may rest assured that the kingdom shall be enriched yearly £200,000, which must be brought to us in so much treasure, because that part of our stock which is not returned to us in wares must necessarily be brought home in treasure. For in this case it cometh to pass in the stock of a kingdom, as in the estate of a private man, who is supposed to have £1,000 yearly revenue and £2,000 of ready money in his chest. If such a man through excess shall spend £1,500 per annum, all his ready money will be gone in 4 years, and in the like time his said money will be doubled if he take a frugal course to spend but £500 per annum, which rule never faileth likewise in the Commonwealth, but in some cases of no great moment, which I will hereafter declare, when I shall shew by whom and in what manner this balance of the kingdom's account ought to be drawn up yearly, or so often as it shall please the state to discover how much we gain or lose by trade with foreign nations. But first I will say something concerning those ways and means which will increase our exportations and diminish our importations of wares, which being done, I will then set down some other arguments both affirmative and negative to strengthen that which is here declared, and thereby to shew that all the other means which are commonly supposed to enrich the kingdom with treasure are altogether insufficient and mere fallacies. Chapter 3. The particular ways and means to increase the exportation of our commodities, and to decrease our consumption of foreign wares. The revenue or stock of a kingdom by which it is provided of foreign wares is either natural or artificial. The natural wealth is so much only as can be spared from our own use and necessities to be exported unto strangers. The artificial consists in our manufactures and industrious trading with foreign commodities, concerning which I will set down such particulars as may serve for the cause we have in hand. Point 1. First, although this realm be already exceeding rich by nature, yet might it be much increased by laying the waste grounds, which are infinite, into such employments as should no way hinder the present revenues of other manufactured lands, but hereby to supply ourselves and prevent the importations of hemp, flax, cordage, tobacco, and divers other things which now we fetch from strangers to our great impoverishing. Point 2. We may likewise diminish our importations, if we would soberly refrain from excessive consumption of foreign wares in our diet and raiment, with such often change of fashions as is used, so much the more to increase the waste and charge, which vices at this present are more notorious amongst us than in former ages. Yet might they easily be amended by enforcing the observation of such good laws as are strictly practiced in other countries against the said excesses, where likewise by commanding their own manufactures to be used, they prevent the coming in of others, without prohibition, or offense to strangers in their mutual commerce. Point 3. In our exportations we must not only regard our own superfluities, but also we must consider our neighbors' necessities, that so upon the wares which they cannot want, nor yet be furnished thereof elsewhere, we may, besides the vent of the materials, gain so much of the manufacture as we can, and also endeavor to sell them dear, so far forth as the high price cause not a less vent in the quantity, but the superfluity of our commodities which strangers use, and may also have the same from other nations, or may abate their vent by the use of some such like wares from other places, and with little inconvenience. We must in this case strive to sell as cheap as possible we can, rather than to lose the utterance of such wares. For we have found of late years, by good experience, that being able to sell our cloth cheap in Turkey, we have greatly increased the vent thereof, and the Venetians have lost as much in the utterance of theirs in those countries, because it is dearer. And on the other side, a few years past, when by excessive price of wools our cloth was exceeding dear, we lost at the least half our clothing for foreign parts, which since is no otherwise well near recovered again than by the great fall-off price for wools and cloth. We find that 25 in the 100 less in the price of these and some other wares, to the loss of private men's revenues, may raise above 50 upon the 100 in the quantity vented to the benefit of the public. For when cloth is dear, other nations do presently practice clothing, and we know they want neither art nor materials to this performance. But when by cheapness we drive them from this employment, and so in time obtain our dear price again, then do they also use their former remedy, so that by these alterations we learn that it is in vain to expect a greater revenue of our wares than their condition will afford, but rather it concerns us to apply our endeavors to the times with care and diligence to help ourselves the best we may, by making our cloth and other manufactures without deceit, which will increase their estimation and use. Point 4. The value of our exportations likewise may be much advanced when we perform it ourselves in our own ships, for then we get only not the price of our wares as they are worth here, but also the merchants' gains, the changes of insurance, and freight to carry them beyond the seas. As for example, if the Italian merchants should come hither in their own shipping to fetch our corn, our red herrings or the like, in the case the kingdom should have ordinarily but 25s for a quarter of wheat, and 20s for a barrel of red herrings. Whereas if we carry these wares ourselves into Italy upon the said rates, it is likely that we shall obtain 50 shillings for the first, and 40 shillings for the last, which is a great difference in the utterance or vent of the kingdom's stock. And although it is true that the commerce ought to be free to strangers to bring in and carry out at their pleasure, yet nevertheless in many places the exportation of victuals and munition are either prohibited, or at least limited to be done only by the people and shipping of those places where they abound. Point 5. The frugal expending likewise of our own natural wealth might advance much yearly to be exported unto strangers. And if in our raiment we will be prodigal, yet let this be done with our own materials and manufactures, as cloth, lace, embroideries, cutworks, and the like, where the excess of the rich may be the employment of the poor, whose labors notwithstanding of this kind would be more profitable for the commonwealth, if they were done to the use of strangers. 6. The fishing in His Majesty's seas of England, Scotland, and Ireland is our natural wealth, and would cost nothing but labor, which the Dutch bestow willingly, and thereby draw yearly a very great profit to themselves by serving many places of Christendom with our fish, for which they return and supply their wants both of foreign wares and money, besides the multitude of mariners and shipping, which hereby are maintained, whereof a long discourse might be made to shew the particular manage of this important business. Our fishing plantation likewise in New England, Virginia, Groenland, the Summer Islands, and the Newfoundland are of the like nature, affording much wealth and employments to maintain a great number of poor, and to increase our decaying trade. Point 7. A staple or magazine for foreign corn, indigo, spices, raw silks, cotton wool, or any other commodity whatsoever, to be imported will increase shipping, trade, treasure, and the king's customs, by exporting them again where need shall require, which course of trading hath been the chief means to raise Venice, Genoa, the Low Countries, with some others, and for such a purpose England stands most commodiously, wanting nothing to this performance but our own diligence and endeavor.
8.
Also we ought to esteem and cherish those trades which we have in remote or far countries, for besides the increase of shipping and mariners thereby, The wares also sent thither and received from thence are far more profitable unto the kingdom than by our trades near at hand. As, for example, suppose pepper to be worth here 2 shillings the pound constantly. If then it be brought from the Dutch at Amsterdam, the merchant may give there 20 pence the pound, and gain well by the bargain. But if he fetch this pepper from the East Indies, he must not give above 3 pence the pound at the most, which is a mighty advantage, not only in that part which serveth for our own use, but also for that great quantity which, from hence, we transport yearly unto divers other nations to be sold at a higher price, whereby it is plain that we make a far greater stock by gain upon these Indian commodities than those nations do where they grow, and to whom they properly appertain, being the natural wealth of their countries. But for the better understanding of this particular, we must ever distinguish between the gain of the kingdom and the profit of the merchant. For although the kingdom payeth no more for this pepper than is before supposed, nor for any other commodity bought in foreign parts more than the stranger receiveth from us for the same, yet the merchant payeth not only that price, but also the freight, insurance, customs, and other charges which are exceeding great in these long voyages. But yet all these in the kingdom's account are but commutations among ourselves, and no privation of the kingdom's stock, which being duly considered, together with the support also of our other trades in our best shipping to Italy,
France,
Turkey, and East countries and other places, by transporting and venting the wares which we bring yearly from the East Indies, it may well stir up our utmost endeavors to maintain and enlarge this great and noble business, so much importing the public wealth, strength, and happiness. Neither is there less honor and judgment by growing rich, in this manner, upon the stock of other nations, than by an industrious increase of our own means, especially when this later is advanced by the benefit of the former, as we have found in the East Indies by sale of much of our tin, cloth, lead, and other commodities, the vent whereof doth daily increase in those countries which formerly had no use of our wares. 9. It would be very beneficial to export money as well as wares. Being done in trade only, it would increase our treasure. But of this I write more largely in the next chapter to prove it plainly.
10.
It were policy and profit for the state to suffer manufactures made of foreign materials to be exported custom-free, as velvets and all other wrought silks, fustians, throne silks, and the like. It would imply very many poor people, and much increase the value of our stock yearly issued into other countries, and it would, for this purpose, cause the more foreign materials to be brought in, to the improvement of His Majesty's customs. I will here remember a notable increase in our manufacture of winding and twisting only of foreign raw silk, which within 35 years to my knowledge did not employ more than 300 people in the city and suburbs of London, where at this present time it doth set on work above 14,000 souls, as upon diligent inquiry hath been credibly reported unto His Majesty's Commissioners for Trade. And it is certain that if the raid foreign commodities might be exported from hence, free of custom, this manufacture would yet increase very much, and decrease as fast in Italy and in the Netherlands. But if any man allege the Dutch proverb, "Live and let others live," I answer, that the Dutchmen, notwithstanding their own proverb, do not only in these kingdoms encroach upon our livings, but also in other foreign parts of our trade where they have power, they do hinder and destroy us in our lawful course of living, hereby taking the bread out of our mouth, which we shall never prevent by plucking the pot from their nose. As of late years too many of us do practice to the great hurt and dishonor of this famor nation. We ought rather to imitate former times in taking sober and worthy courses, more pleasing to God and suitable to our ancient reputation. 11. It is needful also not to charge the native commodities with too great customs, lest by endearing them to the stranger's use, it hinder their vent, and especially foreign wares brought in to be transported again should be favored. For otherwise that manner of trading, so much importing the good of the Commonwealth, cannot prosper nor subsist. but the consumption of such foreign wares in the realm may be the more charged, which will turn to the profit of the kingdom in the balance of the trade, and thereby also enable the king to lay up the more treasure out of his yearly incomes. As of this particular, I intend to write more fully in his proper place, where I shall shew how much money a prince may conveniently lay up without the hurt of his subjects. 12. Lastly, in all things we must endeavor to make the most we can of our own, whether it be natural or artificial, and forasmuch as the people which live by the arts are far more in number than they who are masters of the fruits, we ought the more carefully to maintain those endeavors of the multitude, in whom doth consist the greatest strength and riches both of the king and kingdom. For where the people are many, and the arts good, there the traffic must be great, and the country rich. The Italians employ a greater number of people, and get more money by their industry and manufactures of the raw silks of the kingdom of Sicilia, than the king of Spain and his subjects have by the revenue of this rich commodity. But what need we fetch the examples so far, when we know that our own natural wares do not yield us so much profit as our industry? For iron ore in the mines is of no great worth, when it is compared with the employment and advantage it yields being digged, tried, transported, brought, sold, cast into ordnance, muskets, and many other instruments of war for offense and defense, wrought into anchors, bolts,
spikes,
nailess and the like, for the use of ships, houses, carts, coaches, plows, and other instruments for tillage. Compare our fleece wools with our cloth, which requires shearing, washing, carding, spinning, weaving, fulling, dyeing, dressing, and other trimmings, and we shall find these arts more profitable than the natural wealth, whereof I might instance other examples, but I will not be more tedious. For if I would amplify upon this and the other particulars before written, I might find matter sufficient to make a large volume, but my desire in all is only to prove what I propound with brevity and plainness. Chapter 4. The exportation of our moneys in trade of merchandise is a means to increase our treasure. This position is so contrary to the common opinion, that it will require many and strong arguments to prove it before it can be accepted of the multitude, who bitterly exclaim when they see any moneys carried out of the realm, affirming thereupon that we have absolutely lost so much treasure, and that this is an act directly against the long-continued laws made and confirmed by the wisdom of this kingdom in the High Court of Parliament, and that many places, nay, Spain itself, which is the fountain of money, forbids the exportation thereof, some cases only excepted. To all which I might answer, that Venice, Florence, Genoa, the Low Countries, and divers other places permit it, their people applaud it, and find great benefit by it, but all this makes a noise and proves nothing. We must therefore come to those reasons which concern the business in question. First, I will take that for granted which no man of judgment will deny,